Ever wonder how your brain actually creates the experience of your mind?
It's a question that's fascinated thinkers for centuries.
And today,
Today, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of cognitive neuroscience.
to unpack it,
Together.
huge thank you to the London Heartbeats Z Academy for providing the fascinating material for this deep dive.
You know, it's incredible to think about.
I know, it's like all happening right here in our skulls right now.
Right, and it's a question humans have been grappling with for centuries. Even ancient civilizations were fascinated by, the nature of thought and consciousness.
Yep.
But, they lacked the tools to really investigate it scientifically.
Right, it's like trying to understand a car,
Yeah.
but by just looking at the outside,
Yeah.
you need to pop the hood.
You got it.
You got to see how the engine works.
Yeah.
All the parts that make it go.
Yeah.
And that's where cognitive neuroscience comes in.
Exactly.
Gives us those tools.
It gives us those tools to look under the hood of the human brain. And before we dive into the specific methods, it's worth appreciating how this field evolved.
Okay.
You see, even early on, there was this fundamental debate.
Right.
Does the brain work as a unified whole?
Hmm.
Or are there specialized parts for different functions?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It's like, is the brain one single supercomputer, or is it more like a network of smaller computers, each with a specific job?
A perfect analogy.
Okay.
One of the earliest attempts to map those smaller computers, so to speak,
Okay.
came from the theory of phrenology.
Oh, yeah. Phrenology. Wasn't that the one where they thought bumps on your skull could tell you about your personality?
Precisely.
Really?
They believed that the brain was organized into 35 specific functions,
Wow.
from tangible ones like language and color perception to more abstract concepts like hope and self-esteem.
Okay.
And they thought if someone used one of these faculties a lot, that part of the brain would grow,
Uh-huh.
creating a bump on the skull.
So basically, if you were a really hopeful person, you'd have a hope bump on your head.
That's the idea.
I mean, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Seems a bit far-fetched.
It certainly does now, but it was an early attempt to connect brain structure to function.
Okay.
And, it sparked a debate that continues today about the degree of specialization within the brain. In fact, another researcher conducted experiments on birds,
Okay.
suggesting the brain acted as a whole unit. His findings challenged those early localization theories.
So even back then, scientists were going back and forth about how the brain worked.
Absolutely.
What shifted the thinking?
Well, the real turning point came with landmark discoveries that provided strong evidence for functional localization.
Okay.
2 researchers working with stroke patients found that damage to specific areas of the brain
Uh-huh.
led to very particular deficits.
Interesting.
One patient could understand language but couldn't speak,
Okay.
and the other could speak fluently, but the words were nonsensical.
Wow.
And he couldn't understand spoken or written language.
Wow. So damage to one specific area could affect your ability to speak, while damage to another area could affect your ability to understand language.
Precisely.
That's pretty compelling evidence that different parts of the brain have different jobs.
Exactly. And then came another researcher who meticulously analyzed the cellular organization of the cortex,
Nope.
identifying 52 distinct regions based on their unique cellular structures.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was like he created the first detailed map of the brain's landscape.
So they were starting to really understand the brain's architecture.
Yeah, and this understanding was further revolutionized by 2 more researchers
Okay.
who made groundbreaking discoveries about neurons themselves.
Yeah.
One developed a stain that allowed individual neurons to be visualized for the very first time.
Wow.
Using this stain, the second researcher discovered that neurons are actually discrete entities
Okay.
and that they communicate in a specific direction,
Mm.
from dendrites to the axonal tip.
Hold on. Before these discoveries, did scientists not even know what individual brain cells look like or how they talk to each other?
That's right. It was a huge leap forward.
That's wild.
These discoveries laid the foundation for modern neuroscience.
Wow.
As we move to the 20th century, the debate between holistic processing and functional localization continued,
Uh-huh.
but the field was branching out.
Okay.
While medical professionals focused on studying brain function through injuries and disorders,
Yeah.
psychologists were exploring behavior and the mind.
So 2 different fields were approaching the brain from different angles.
Exactly.
How did they come together to form the field we know today as cognitive neuroscience?
Well, the term cognitive neuroscience was coined in the 1970s
Okay.
when it became clear that a new mission was needed
Okay.
to understand how the brain actually enables the mind
So it's like all these pieces of the puzzle were finally coming together.
Right, and to truly understand how the brain makes the mind, we need to start with the anatomy,
Okay.
the structure of this incredible organ.
Okay, let's get into the brain's blueprint.
Let's do it!
Where do we even begin with something so complex?
Well, a great place to start is with the cerebral cortex,
Okay.
the outermost layer of the brain.
Uh-huh.
Imagine a thin sheet of layered neurons, about 2,200 to 2,400 centimeters MO, all folded up to fit inside your skull.
Wait, so the cortex is actually a flat sheet?
You can think of it that way.
That's bizarre.
It's highly folded,
Yeah.
creating those wrinkles and grooves you see in pictures of the brain.
Uh-huh.
This allows for more surface area,
Okay.
and as a result, more processing power.
It's like nature's way of packing a supercomputer into a small space.
Exactly.
So what is this sheet made of?
Well, the cortex has two main components.
Okay.
Gray matter,
Uh-huh.
composed of the cell bodies of neurons,
Okay.
and white matter,
Huh?
which is made up of the axons that connect those neurons throughout the brain.
Got it.
The cerebral cortex is divided into two symmetrical hemispheres,
Okay.
each with four main subdivisions or lobes: frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital.
So it's like a massive network
It is.
with different regions specialized for different tasks.
Yeah.
But how do we actually study these regions and figure out what they do?
That's where the real detective work of cognitive neuroscience comes in.
Okay.
Researchers have developed a variety of methods, each offering a unique window into how the brain operates.
Let's open that toolkit and see what's inside.
I like it.
All right?
There are 7 main methods,
Okay.
each providing a different piece of the puzzle.
Uh-huh.
We have neuroanatomy,
Okay.
neurophysiology,
Okay.
neurology,
Okay.
functional neurosurgery,
Got it.
cognitive psychology,
Okay.
computer modeling,
Okay.
and converging methods,
Okay.
which bring together insights from multiple approaches.
Wow, it sounds like a comprehensive approach.
It is.
Each method complementing the others.
Yeah.
So first up, neuroanatomy. What's
All
the focus there?
Neuroanatomy is all about understanding the brain's intricate connections. It's like mapping out a vast, complex city
Uh-huh.
with billions of interconnected roads and buildings.
That sounds like a monumental task.
It is. The challenge lies in the sheer density and interweaving of neurons.
Yeah.
To unravel this complexity, scientists use refined staining techniques that can differentiate between the cell bodies and the axons, allowing them to trace the connections and map out the different regions of the brain.
It's incredible to think that we can now trace the pathways of individual neurons.
It's amazing, isn't it?
So neuroanatomy gives us the brain's structural map.
Right.
What about neurophysiology?
Okay.
How is that different?
Neurophysiology takes us beyond the map and into the realm of function.
Okay.
This field recognizes that structure and function are inseparable,
Right.
and it utilizes techniques to measure and manipulate neuron activity to directly examine how they communicate and process information.
So it's like observing the traffic flowing through that city we mapped out.
Yeah, a great analogy.
How do researchers actually study neural activity?
One method that might surprise you is electrical stimulation.
Okay.
By stimulating specific brain areas in awake patients undergoing neurosurgery,
Oh, wow.
researchers can observe the responses and gain insights into the organization of the brain.
Wait, they stimulate the brain while the patient is awake?
They do.
That sounds intense.
It might sound alarming,
Yeah.
but it's a safe and valuable procedure.
Okay.
Back in the 1950s, researchers used this technique to map the motor and sensory areas of the brain.
Uh-huh.
For example, stimulating a certain point might cause a patient's finger to twitch,
Okay.
revealing a direct connection between that brain area and finger movement.
So by systematically stimulating different areas, they could build up a functional map of the brain.
Exactly.
That's incredible. What other techniques are used to study neural activity?
Another key technique is single-cell recording.
Okay.
This involves inserting a thin electrode into the brain of a laboratory animal
Yeah.
and recording the activity of a single neuron.
I know this type of research can be controversial, but it sounds like it could offer incredible insights.
It does. By listening in on a single neuron, researchers can understand how individual neurons respond to different stimuli.
Okay.
For example, by presenting a visual stimulus and observing which neurons in the visual cortex fire, we can learn how the brain processes visual information at a cellular level.
So it's like eavesdropping on the brain's conversations.
Exactly.
And then there are lesion studies, right?
Yes, lesion studies involve examining the effects of damage to a particular part of the brain.
Right.
Now, for ethical reasons, we can't intentionally create lesions in humans.
That makes sense. So how do researchers study lesions?
Well, we study patients who have naturally occurring lesions due to things like strokes,
Ah,
accidents,
yeah.
or other medical conditions.
Right.
The logic is this: if a specific brain area is responsible for a particular function,
Yeah.
damaging that area should impair that function.
So by observing what's no longer working, we can deduce what that part of the brain was doing.
That's the idea.
Are there any famous examples of this?
One of the most famous cases is Phineas Gage,
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
a railway worker who had a metal rod go through his skull, damaging his frontal lobe.
Yeah.
His case was one of the earliest to show the role of the frontal lobe in things like personality and decision-making.
Yeah, it's a reminder of how delicate the brain is
It is.
and how even a small amount of damage can have a huge impact.
Absolutely.
How are lesions studied today?
Well, modern technology has been a game changer.
Oh,
With MRI scans, we can visualize both normal and lesioned brains,
Right.
allowing for precise comparisons and analysis.
So we've got electrical stimulation,
Yeah.
single-cell recording,
Uh-huh.
and lesion studies.
Right.
All incredible tools for understanding how the brain works.
They are.
What about the field of neurology?
Okay.
How does that contribute to cognitive neuroscience?
Neurology focuses on the brain-behavior relationship through the lens of human pathology,
Okay.
the study of diseases.
Right.
By studying patients with specific neurological impairments, we can gain even more precise insights into brain structure and function.
Makes sense.
Early neurologists relied on postmortem studies to link specific brain areas to cognitive functions.
Hmm.
But things are much more sophisticated now.
So even after death, the brain can still teach us valuable lessons.
It can.
But what if the damage isn't localized to a single area?
That's where it gets more challenging.
Okay.
When there's diffuse damage,
Uh-huh.
meaning it's spread across multiple areas.
Okay.
Drawing clear conclusions becomes much harder.
It's like trying to figure out how a machine works when multiple parts are broken.
Great analogy.
But thankfully, we now have structural imaging techniques like CT scans
We do.
that allow us to clearly see the extent of neurological damage in living patients.
Exactly.
That must be incredibly helpful for diagnosis and treatment.
It is.
What are some of the causes of neurological disorders?
Well, there's a wide range from vascular disorders like strokes to tumors, degenerative and infectious diseases
Okay.
like multiple sclerosis, and Huntington's disease,
Right.
and even trauma, as in the case of Phineas Gage.
Right.
It's amazing how much we've learned about the brain from studying what happens when things go wrong.
It really is.
You mentioned functional neurosurgery earlier.
Yes.
What does that involve?
Fill me in.
Functional neurosurgery, like lobotomy,
Yeah.
was used in the past to try to treat certain psychiatric disorders. While it's largely been abandoned, it did provide some insights into the roles of different brain regions.
It's fascinating and a little unsettling
It is.
to think about how our understanding of the brain and our approaches to treating it have evolved over time.
It certainly has been a journey of discovery, and each method has built upon the knowledge gained from the others.
That's fascinating.
Now let's shift gears and explore cognitive psychology, which takes a different approach by focusing on the mind itself.
Okay, let's step away from the physical brain for a moment and dive into the realm of thoughts and perceptions.
Let's do it.
What's the main focus of cognitive psychology?
Cognitive psychology views mental processes as internal transformations or computations. It's interested in how information is represented, stored, and processed in the mind.
So instead of focusing on neurons firing, we're zooming out to look at how thoughts and ideas are formed and manipulated.
Precisely. Think of it like this. If I asked you to describe a ball rolling down a hill, you could use a complex physics equation.
Yeah.
But a simple picture would be much more efficient.
Right. A picture's worth 1,000 words, or in this case, 1,000 equations.
Exact.
So cognitive psychology, it's interested in those mental pictures, those representations.
Exactly. And it also explores the limitations of our information processing.
Okay.
A classic example is the Stroop task,
Okay.
where participants have to name the color of ink a word is printed in, even when the word itself is a different color.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Yeah.
Like if the word blue is written in red ink, you have to say red.
Right.
Isn't that really hard?
It is, because the word itself interferes with your ability to name the ink color. It highlights how our brains process information and how sometimes that processing can be disrupted by conflicting inputs.
That's really interesting. So we've got neuroanatomy, mapping the brain's structure, neurophysiology, examining its function, and cognitive psychology, exploring the mind itself. What about computer modeling? Where does that fit in?
Computer modeling is a fascinating approach that involves creating computer programs to simulate brain processes.
Okay.
It's a valuable tool because it forces researchers to be very explicit about their assumptions and predictions.
So it's like building a virtual brain, testing out different theories about how it works.
You could think of it that way. While computer models are necessarily simplified, they can provide valuable insights into how cognitive processes might work.
I can see how that would be helpful, but the brain is so complex.
It is.
Even the most sophisticated computer model must be a vast oversimplification.
Absolutely. It's crucial to remember that computer models are just that, models.
Right.
They can be useful for generating hypotheses and testing ideas, but they can't fully capture the complexity of the human brain.
That makes sense. So we've talked about several different methods: neuroanatomy, neurophysiology, neurology, cognitive psychology, and computer modeling. You also mentioned converging methods. What does that mean?
Converging methods is a powerful approach that involves combining evidence from different methods to build a stronger case for a particular interpretation.
Okay.
Think of it like gathering evidence from multiple sources in a detective investigation.
So instead of relying on just one clue, you're looking for multiple pieces of evidence that point in the same direction.
Exactly. One example is combining lesion studies with neuroimaging.
Okay.
If damage to a specific area correlates with impairment on a specific task, and brain scans show that this area is active during that task, that provides strong converging evidence for the role of that area.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like having multiple witnesses corroborating the same story. Are there other examples of converging methods?
Another important example is the use of single and double dissociations. A single dissociation occurs when a patient with a specific brain lesion performs poorly on task A but normally on task B.
So we might conclude that the damaged area is involved in task A, but not task B.
Right.
But couldn't there be other explanations?
There could be. That's why double dissociations are even more powerful.
Okay.
In a double dissociation, we have two patients, one with damage to area X and the other with damage to area Y.
Got it.
The first patient performs poorly on task A but normally on task B,
Okay.
while the second patient performs normally on task A but poorly on task B.
So it's like a crossover effect, providing stronger evidence that areas X and Y are involved in distinct functions.
Exactly. Converging methods also emphasize studying both individuals and groups.
Okay.
Individual case studies like Phineas Gage can provide rich and detailed insights.
Yeah.
But every brain is unique, so individual variability can make it difficult to generalize findings.
That's where group studies come in, right?
Right. By studying a group of people with similar brain lesions, we can minimize individual differences and reveal consistent patterns of behavioral deficits.
So group studies help us see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
But even then, comparing brains across individuals must be challenging, given all the anatomical variations.
You're right. To address this, researchers often use a standardized brain template called the Talirac brain,
Okay.
which allows for more accurate comparisons.
So it's like having a universal map for navigating the brain.
Precisely.
This has been incredibly illuminating.
Good.
But we've been focusing on studying brains that have been damaged in some way. What about imaging the healthy brain?
Okay.
What tools are available for that?
There's a whole array of fascinating techniques for imaging the healthy brain in action.
Okay.
One that's really revolutionized the field is transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS.
PMS. I've heard of that, but I'm not quite sure how it works.
TMS is a non-invasive technique that uses magnetic pulses to create temporary lesions in the brain.
Wait, temporary lesions. So you can temporarily disrupt the activity of a specific brain area?
Precisely. It's like a virtual lesion,
Wow.
allowing researchers to study the behavioral consequences of temporarily turning off a part of the brain without causing any permanent damage.
That's incredible. So if you apply TMS to a certain area and the person suddenly can't speak,
Yeah.
that area is involved in language production.
Exactly. But it's important to note that the precision of TMS is still limited.
Okay.
The magnetic pulse affects a relatively large area of the brain, so it's not a pinpoint tool.
Still, it's a remarkable technique.
Yeah.
What other methods are used to image the healthy brain?
Another category is scalp recordings,
Okay.
which involve measuring electrical activity in the brain using electrodes placed on the scalp.
Like an EEG?
Exactly. An electroencephalogram, or EEG, passively measures the electrical activity from neurons that reaches the scalp.
Okay.
It's very useful for studying sleep patterns and overall brain activity.
So it gives us a general picture of what the brain is doing.
Yes, but we can also get more specific information using event-related potentials, or ERPs. ERPs are time-locked EEG recordings, meaning they're synchronized with the presentation of a stimulus or the initiation of a behavior.
So instead of just looking at overall brain activity, you're looking at how the brain responds to a specific event.
Right. By averaging multiple EEG readings, we can filter out noise and reveal specific patterns of brain activity related to different cognitive processes.
It's like extracting the signal from the noise.
Exactly.
What other scalp recording techniques are there?
Another one is magnetoencephalography, or MEG.
MEG. Okay.
It's similar to ERP, but measures magnetic fields produced by neurons instead of electrical signals.
So two different ways of eavesdropping on the brain's activity. What are the advantages of MEG?
MEG has the advantage of being less distorted by the skull and scalp than EEG.
Okay.
So it provides more accurate spatial information.
That sounds like a significant advantage, but is there a downside?
The main downside is cost imaging. MEG is extremely expensive, requiring sophisticated equipment and shielding.
That's a factor that often limits research. What about PT scans?
Positron emission tomography, or PET, is another technique that's been instrumental in cognitive neuroscience.
Okay.
It indirectly measures neural activity by tracking blood flow.
Okay, walk me through how that works.
It starts with injecting a radioactive tracer into the bloodstream.
Okay.
This tracer is taken up by active brain regions,
Uh-huh.
and the PE scanner detects the radiation emitted by the tracer, allowing researchers to visualize which areas are most active.
So the more active a brain area, the more blood flow it receives and the more radioactive tracer takes up.
Exactly. One limitation of PET is that it takes time for the tracer to clear from the brain.
Okay.
So you can only compare a limited number of conditions in a single experiment.
I see. So PET gives us a snapshot of brain activity,
Yes.
but it's not as dynamic as some of the other techniques we've discussed.
That's right. Now, another technique that also measures blood flow, but in a different way, is functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI.
fMRI, that's the one you see those colorful brain images from, right?
That's the one fMRI measures what's called the Boldy response.
Okay, which stands for blood oxygen level dependent.
Okay, so how does blood oxygen level relate to brain activity?
When a brain area becomes active, it demands more oxygen.
Uh-huh.
So blood flow to that area increases.
Okay.
fMRI can detect these changes in blood flow by measuring the ratio of oxygenated to deoxygenated hemoglobin.
So the more active a brain area, the more oxygenated blood it receives, and the stronger the Boldy signal.
Precisely. One of the biggest advantages of fMR over PET is that it's much faster.
Okay.
You can present different stimuli or tasks in quick succession and observe how the brain responds in real time.
That's amazing. So we can actually see the brain thinking.
It really is remarkable.
It's remarkable how far brain imaging technology has come.
It really is. And each of these methods, from neuroanatomy to neuroimaging, has provided invaluable insights into the workings of the brain.
Yeah.
The real power of cognitive neuroscience comes from combining these approaches to paint a richer, more complete picture of how the brain enables the mind.
Makes sense.
And just like with PET, fMRI also uses the subtraction method. Okay, refresh my memory on how that works again.
Imagine you want to study the brain activity involved in listening to music.
Okay.
You would take an fMRI scan of the brain while the person is resting quietly.
Yeah.
Then you'd take another scan while they're listening to music
Okay.
by subtracting the resting state activity from the music listening activity.
Mm-hmm.
You isolate the brain areas specifically activated by listening to music.
Right. It's like removing the background noise to see the signal you're interested in.
Exactly. And because fMRI is so fast, we can get a much more dynamic view of brain activity,
Okay.
observing how it changes over time in response to different stimuli.
So it's not just static snapshots, but a movie of the brain in action.
It really is remarkable, and it's just one example of how advancements in brain imaging technology have revolutionized our understanding of the healthy brain.
It's amazing to think that we can now see the brain thinking in real time. And all this is thanks to the hard work and ingenuity of cognitive neuroscientists. It seems like this field is constantly evolving with new discoveries being made all the time.
That's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah.
It's a truly interdisciplinary field,
Uh-huh.
drawing on insights from psychology, biology, medicine, computer science, and even philosophy.
Wow.
And as technology continues to advance, we're able to ask even more sophisticated questions about the brain and the mind.
It's like we're peeling back the layers of a mystery that has captivated humanity for centuries.
Yeah.
And throughout our discussion today, one question has kept coming up. How does the brain actually enable the mind?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It feels like it.
While we've made tremendous strides in understanding the brain,
Yeah.
the emergence of consciousness, of subjective experience,
Yeah.
remains one of the biggest mysteries in science.
It's like we have all these pieces of the puzzle neurons, firing brain regions, lighting up complex computations happening.
Yeah.
But we're still trying to figure out how it all comes together to create the feeling of being you,
Right.
of experiencing the world.
Exactly. It's a question that philosophers have been pondering for millennia, and cognitive neuroscience is now providing new tools and perspectives to explore this age-old enigma.
And that's what makes this field so fascinating. It's not just about understanding the mechanics of the brain, but ultimately about understanding ourselves,
It is.
the very essence of what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And while we may never have all the answers, the journey of discovery is itself incredibly rewarding.
It certainly is.
Yeah.
A huge thank you again to the London Heartbeat Z Academy for providing us with the incredible material for this deep dive.
We've covered so much ground today, from the historical roots of cognitive neuroscience to the intricate anatomy of the brain and the diverse methods used to unlock its secrets.
It feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore.
That's the beauty of scientific inquiry. Each discovery opens up new questions, new avenues to explore.
And that's what keeps us coming back for more. It's the thrill of the unknown, the possibility of uncovering something truly groundbreaking.
Couldn't agree more.
And as we delve deeper into the brain, who knows what amazing insights await us.
Who knows?
I can't wait to find out.
Me too.
But for now, we've reached the end of our deep dive into cognitive neuroscience.
It's been a fascinating journey, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I feel like I've gained a new appreciation for the complexity and wonder of the human brain.
Yeah.
And it left me with a sense of awe and a burning desire to learn more.
I feel the same way, and I hope our listeners do too.
I'm sure they do. So until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep exploring the world with curiosity and wonder.
Great advice.
And don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube for more mind-bending explorations.
And remember, folks, the most fascinating world you'll ever explore is the one inside your own head.
It is amazing to think that we can see the brain thinking in real time.
It is.
So much to think about. Out of all the amazing techniques and discoveries we discussed,
Yeah.
what really stood out to you?
That's a great question. For me, it's the power of those converging methods.
Yes.
You know, seeing how different approaches can come together to strengthen our understanding, it really highlights the collaborative nature of cognitive neuroscience.
Absolutely. And speaking of collaboration, I have to give another shout out to the London Heartbeats Z Academy.
Yes.
For providing us with all this incredible material. Make sure to check them out, listeners. They're doing amazing work
They are.
in education and outreach.
Yes, absolutely.
But getting back to your point about converging methods,
Yeah.
it's like solving a mystery, right?
It's?
You need multiple clues to point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And each method provides a different piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when those pieces fit together,
Yeah.
it's incredibly satisfying. It's like a light bulb going off in your head.
Yeah.
That aha moment when you start to really understand something.
I had one of those moments when we were talking about TMS. You know,
Yeah.
the idea that we can temporarily turn off parts of the brain
Yeah.
to see what happens is just mind-blowing.
It's remarkable.
It's like having a remote control for the brain.
It is pretty remarkable, isn't it? And the implications for research and therapy are huge.
Yeah.
We're talking about the potential to treat conditions like depression, anxiety, even Parkinson's disease,
Wow.
by precisely targeting specific brain areas.
It's both exciting and a little bit daunting
It is.
to think about the power we're gaining over the brain.
Yeah.
It really underscores the importance of ethical considerations in research and clinical practice.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It's crucial that we use these powerful tools responsibly.
Another thing that really struck me was the idea of mental representation.
Yeah.
How our brains create these internal models of the world.
Right.
The Stroop task is such a great example of that.
Yes, a classic.
It shows how our brains can get tripped up by conflicting information,
Yeah.
revealing the hidden mechanisms of how we process language and color.
It's a classic example of how cognitive psychology can give us insights into the inner workings of the mind. And computer modeling plays a role here too.
Right. It's fascinating that we can use computers to simulate brain processes.
Yeah.
Even though we're still so far from creating anything close to the complexity of the human brain.
It's true that computer models are simplified representations, but they're incredibly valuable for testing theories, generating predictions, and pushing our understanding forward.
And it seems like with every new discovery, we open up more questions, more avenues for exploration.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to that fundamental question that drives cognitive neuroscience.
Yeah.
How does the brain enable the mind? It's a question that might never have a definitive answer, but the pursuit of that answer is what makes this field so captivating.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. The mystery of consciousness may remain elusive, but with each new insight, each new technique, we're getting closer to understanding this incredible organ that makes us who we are.
Well said. And a final thank you to the London Heartbeat Z Academy for making this deep dive possible.
To our listeners, keep those brains buzzing. Explore the world with curiosity and wonder. And if you want more mind-bending explorations like this one, don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. Until next time,